we often measure rural people as backwards and illiterate, but why do you need to read when for hundreds of years your form of communication was through music, dance, drawing, and painting? Reimagine a product not just as like a vapid thing that you buy, but as a museum of culture, anthropology, and true meaning.
Tell us a little bit about your business.
Yeah, so since we are an art company, we have a lot of visuals.
We have props, which we love.
Yeah, we're all about props here. Yeah. So Roots Studio is an organization that works with last generation indigenous artists, and we work with them to digitize their designs into an online library that we provide to high-end fashion, retail, and other types of brands to manufacture onto thousands of products.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how long have you been doing this, and sort of what has the journey been so far?
So it's been 4 years, and right now we have worked with mostly about 10 tribes in India. We also work in rural China. We work with Syrian and Yemeni calligraphers in Jordan. And we also now have pilots in Indonesia and Panama. So kind of all over the place. The communities that we generally work with are indigenous. They're generally rural by census designation, and they are very creative in nature and have a strong interest to use their creative skills as their primary form of income. And our whole mission is to basically change the idea of artistry or the creative sector as one that's struggling, but that instead of them often being actually excluded from this whole buzz of innovation, that they can participate and contribute their brilliance to the whole narrative of innovation that's more diverse by combining that with sustainable economics.
Yeah. So I want to come back to all of that because it's super interesting, but how does a young Broolynite from the Berg in New York, how did you get so interested, and what brought you to indigenous arts and calligraphy and all this exciting stuff?
Well, saying that I'm like a young burger from Brooklyn is giving me too much hip credit because I actually
you look pretty hip right now, I'd have to say.
Thank you.
Earrings, I love them.
I actually just moved there 2 months ago and have been I've been there for all of 1 week.
But living the life. Looking at that.
Thank you. So I mean, I think in general, I would say I'm pretty culturally fluidic. So I moved schools about 12 times before I turned 21.
Wow.
And that's partly because of my father, who is a sabbatical professor.
Okay.
Partly. So I was born in New Jersey and then had moved to Hong Kong and moved a ton around there and then moved out to rural Arizona next to the Coconino Forest and then out to the Bay Area, and then I ended up spending actually most of my 20s all in India.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack that a little. So what did you do with most of your 20s in India?
Okay, well, there's a thread here, but the first time I actually went there, people were like, the two questions I get the most often are why India, and how do you get into with rural arts for such a long time? And I've been on this journey for about the last 4.5 years. And so when I was 19, I was doing a lot of literature about urbanization, and a lot of the case studies were actually rooted in South Asia. And there are all these case studies that were based in Calcutta and in West Bengal, and even the numbers were just crazy. I mean, there's 600 million people that live in rural areas. That's 2 times the U.S. population that engages in an agrarian and subsistence way of life. And that's changing all in the next 10, 20 years, right before our eyes. But this was something that I couldn't understand just being from the States. And so I was like, I'll scrap together whatever savings I have. And then I ended up in a city called Ahmedabad in India. And you guys have you ever been to? Shay has. which is in the state of Gujarat.
Awesome.
And then my parents were furious because I told them about a month in advance. But I was like, I'm going to go because I need to do this. And to make them feel better, I started. I asked my friend, and I was like, I need some type of a internship so that it doesn't look like I'm going rogue here. I'm pulling like a young Steve Jobs thing here. And so my friend's like, you can work for my landscape architect, and I was like, okay, cool. And I had an architecture and urban design background.
Okay, so it makes a little more sense.
Yeah. So I ended up there, but I actually didn't end up really doing any of the work in the landscape architecture firm because I became really fascinated. Actually, in Ahmedabad, there's these cows that hang out everywhere, and they chill really hardcore, and like I was really fascinated with I was really fascinated with like their sentience and just like they can be.
All right, Evan's enjoying this interview a lot, which is great.
And I was like, wow, what is it like to be a bovine with so much free will? So I told myself, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take my sketchbook with me, and I'm gonna pick a cow every day and follow it for 3 hours, no matter what.
Wow.
And one of my ways of just sketching my observations is through maps. I like to think cartographically. Mm-hmm. And a week in, my boss at this landscape architecture firm was like, "What have you been up to?" And I'm like, show him my sketches, and there's these cow maps. And he was like, this is brilliant. And I was like, what, really? And he was like, yeah, you should stop. At that time, he tried to put me on a project with Solyndra, who was trying to expand into India. And then after that summer, they went bankrupt, so I was glad that didn't happen. But he was like, yeah, you should just keep doing this because your observations are starting to really reveal this very interesting relationship. It's not just about following these cows. These cows come into the city with migrants from rural places. And the cow and the buffalo has a very central place in the rural way of life. And that's one of the things I noticed. Like these cows have names, like they have people who take care of them in the cities and this whole ecosystem. So anyways, long story short, that turned into a 3-year project called The Secret Life of Urban Animals, which sought to understand also like street dogs and even some wildlife, including leopards and elephants in India, mm-hmm. and their relationship in this whole trajectory of urbanization. But from rural to urban. So how did indigenous people formerly kind of cope with these natural, these animals? And when things happen as we urbanize, there's a lot of things that happen that there are potential deaths from like leopard attacks or elephants go into human territory, and these things happen where we're really, really angry about it. But a lot of places that are rural used to have rules where they would follow and respect these natural rules and boundaries of life. So anyways, yeah, I promise there's a route to.
Okay, so
but that's how I ended up in India.
Right.
Yeah.
So just a stock standard business development journey. Yeah. No follow-up questions there. That's amazing.
There's a link to roots at some point, but yeah. Yeah.
Let's go into it. Keep going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm loving this.
I don't know if you're really okay.
No.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
So what happens? Yeah, we're doing this project for a few years.
And I think one of the things that started to happen while I was also doing this animal project was this fundamental question of like, what am I here for? Like, Rebecca, like, is it like very academic? And I was doing a lot of these art exhibitions and research. Is this really making a change in any way, or mm-hmm. is this just like very intellectual? Even though it was creating a lot of commentary about urbanization and
sure.
human-animal interactions, how do we negotiate spaces? And so one of the first things I started doing as a way to be like, okay, how do we bridge this rural-urban divide? And a super naive project that I was like, okay, one way to do this is let's look through the lens of education. And education and accessibility in rural areas is often due to lack of infrastructure or being too far away from like an actual school. So there's very high teacher and student absenteeism. So I was like, well, if we want to solve this problem, let's build a school on wheels and put the classroom in the bus and then like bring it to after school programs in this cluster of villages that we were working in West Bengal. So it was a very, very new project, and we co-designed it with a cluster of villages in the Bardhaman district in West Bengal as this giant, it was like a giant rainbow owl, because owls were very significant in the area.
The school itself was
it was
on
in this
wheels.
bus. And then
Amazing.
I had hired teachers from this private school in Calcutta called La Martiniere. About 2 months in, these teachers were telling me these Adivasi children, the Santali and Ochiki children are too shy and they can't learn like math and English fast enough. And they're too shy. And one of the things that was very strange to me about the observation is when I saw them dance and engage in music and paint and draw, they were very audacious and bold. And there was a brilliance there that was amazing. And I think oftentimes we often measure rural people as backwards and illiterate, but why do you need to read when for hundreds of years your form of communication was through music, dance, drawing, and painting? And there was a form of communication that was so rich in that regard. And fundamentally, if you look statistically, like why the bridge from rural to urban areas, there's such a sharp drop in education between like the 8th standard and onwards, a lot of it has to do with the fact that that they're not getting jobs, even like the most talented, the most well-educated people who are going to cities. So it fundamentally re-challenged my notion of education for what, and especially for the rural sector. And that struck a really deep chord for me, also as someone who identifies as an artist and a creative, that we're often told that our ways of thinking, just because it can't fit in neatly in an Excel sheet, and can't quantify this right away, that it's not valuable.
I think that might have been me you were just interpreting.
I love Excel sheets now, and I love Excel sheets a lot. So I think the core roots now, we started to look at education as it relates to how does it formalize the skills and assets for them as visual and creative people and connect them to very practical elements of sustainable income.
Amazing. So I know you're really passionate about, I think, just different ways to be like unorthodox, but also inclusive education and economic empowerment for women. How does all of this play into what you believe the future of Root Studio is? And where are we taking it from here?
Yeah. So for Root Studio, we want to be the premium go-to repository for brands and creatives all around the world that want to reimagine a product, not just as like a vapid thing that you buy, but as a museum of culture, anthropology, and true meaning, and actual economics that really rewrite authorship and subvert cultural appropriation, instead of it being extractive, but that nothing actually leaves the village but the brilliance and the IP from these people.
Woo! Amazing.
Yeah.